The EU raises so many questions today.
Tonight's special report will focus on this British bombshell event. The UK has chosen to leave the EU.
Súlyosan sértő jelentésre adott választ, amit a magyar kormány dolgozott ki, most memorandumként átadjuk a parlament elnökének.
I'll make one prediction this morning. The United Kingdom will not be the last member state to leave the European Union. So the question is, what do we do next?
But have we really understood it?
Today, more than yesterday, the EU is under the fire of criticisms.
The EU will continue, but it's true that in its current form, it's sometimes put into question. With the immigration crisis, for example, there are indeed flaws. We cannot tolerate the Mediterranean becoming a cemetery. What I'd like is for France to regain the possibility of making social policies again, because the EU is far too liberal in my opinion. We need to get out of the treaties. So there's two ways of doing it. The first will be through discussion, which will be something new, by the way, but I'm not saying this for you. So far, presidents of the French Republic have not discussed a thing. They don't tell Mrs. Merkel, listen, our people just voted no. You voted no as well, as I did in 2005. They didn't say, our people voted no, so it's not possible, we're going to have to redo it. They've taken the text, cut it into pieces, thrown it out, glued it back together, and then said, this is the Lisbon Treaty.
Je comprends pas très bien quand au niveau.
I don't understand. When on the French level things are allowed, and at the European level they are forbidden. And when decisions clash like that, it's very difficult for me to understand.
Since 2015, we have asked young Europeans on their sense of belonging to the EU. According to a survey by France Télévisions, 77% of young people from 18 to 34 claim to feel European. And yet, this is not what we observe in the field. Euroscepticism, abstentionism, feeling of indifference. Are young people really fully involved in a union that they have always known?
Do you think that a European sentiment, European identity exists?
Well, I think that, yes, maybe not how we might imagine it, like a feeling similar to the French national feeling. Not in that sense.
Pas dans ce sens-là. Plutôt dans le sens où on a quand même.
Rather in the sense that we have all known common historical events, periods of immigration in common in history, cultural, artistic, architectural trends that we have all experienced and that we can find everywhere in Europe. So in this sense, yes. And also regarding shared ideas and cultures. There are many differences, of course, but we share common ground and common values.
Nobody in Britain, very few people think of themselves as a European citizen. We've never been told that we're a European citizen, we're a British citizen. I never feel like a European citizen. For people living in France and Germany, the idea of being a European citizen is a much greater thing than it is in Britain.
Feeling European? Maybe in the sense of movement. Maybe in the fact that movement between the countries in the Union, this freedom of movement, maybe in that regard I do feel European. There aren't many difficulties, few administrative hassles going from one European country to the next. So in that sense, yeah, I can say I feel European.
Okay, so do you feel more French or more European?
French or European? Both, yeah, I think both.
Is there not one that you'd say maybe more than the other?
No, not for me.
Do you feel more Alsatian, French or European?
All three at once. Yeah, all three at once. But then, often at our age, we travel a lot for our studies. I've studied in Pantelei too. We switch cities a lot. So I feel like a citizen from all over, really. Because there are many places where I could live, where I could work and build a life. I'm sure I'd be fine elsewhere in Europe, but I do feel very French, that is certain. And Alsatian too. Alsace is my region. This is where my roots are.
It's very interesting to see that we're all attached, in one way or another, to these symbols of the EU, to the symbols of this coming together, of this gathering of different nationalities who don't necessarily share the same customs and traditions, but who decide to work together in order to build a continent and an economy. And this, I think, creates a real sense of unity. There is an obvious fact. The EU does have difficulties. It's hard to believe in the European project when we're young and struggling to find a job in our own country. So we tell ourselves this is the fault of that one or this one, and sometimes the blame is on the EU, which happens to be a scapegoat for a lot of people. It's really important to distinguish between Europe and the decisions that the European institutions take and the architecture of the world economy. We value our national identity, but we also value Schengen, we value being able to establish economic links with countries like Poland, like Germany, or even like Greece, and it's important that we continue to do that. At any rate, I think that economic exchanges aren't between countries, but from trader to trader, from a civil society to another. And as long as we continue, as long as we declare being in favour of that, and we should declare it, the EU will hold on.
Depuis que je suis en France,
Since I've been in France, I've felt more European, because I feel the European impact more.
l'impact européen.
Really? In Strasbourg, you feel this impact more than in Italy?
Oui, peut-être parce que
Yeah, because there's the European Parliament and the European institutions. They're more present here than in Italy. We don't really talk about the EU in our daily lives. As a student, I face the so-called European reality every day.
le fait d'être européen. Je répète le fait qu'en tant qu'étudiante, je fais face tous les jours à la...
Because I meet students from different countries. Belgians, Spaniards, the Portuguese, the Italians.
De l'Espagne, des Portugais, des Italiens, voilà.
Do you feel close to these people? Do you feel a connection due to being Europeans?
Yeah. Firstly, because we are in a different country, but we don't necessarily feel like...
Foreigners?
Yeah, foreigners.
I'm certainly aware of this dual identity, which I think is not the case for a lot of people in my generation. It's true that it's quite complicated, but this idea of European citizenship is quite recent and still in the process of being built. So I've got a lot of hope for the future.
I arrived here a few years ago. I arrived as a Moldovan citizen before receiving the Romanian citizenship.
Why were you in favour of it?
In my country, we say that one is good, but several is better. And this is what the EU does. We pool resources together and we get things from it. For example, I don't need a residence permit. It makes things a bit easier.
Because Moldova isn't in the EU.
Yes, so far. It's only a dream so far, but we are a bit divided in my country. We are directly of the nationality, the identity of the country we come from, because we grew up there. We have the values of this country. And in the answers that people give, everyone mentions their country first. And I agree with that. It is the basis for us. However, on the European identity, I do feel completely European, because Europe has allowed me to live abroad in Europe, and I don't feel like a stranger in France. I feel at the same time German and European. Actually, I feel German first. For example, I care for the area I grew up in, and I feel German because I have lived my whole life in Germany. But I also feel European. Even if it's not as strong, I want to feel even more strongly European in the future.
If you have a debate with just French people, if you only take French politicians and make them debate with one another, Europe is never going to be the subject. On the other hand, if you have a debate with a French person, a Polish person, a Czech person, a Slovakian person, they'll actually discuss Europe. They will go beyond national disputes, which can often lead nowhere. The media didn't really talk about the European elections in 2014.
In the media, you never see any MEP apart from Nigel Farage?
No.
All right.
It's not a topic of news what happens in the European Parliament.
Je pense qu'on est dans une crise assez générale des démocraties.
I think that we're going through a rather general crisis of the Western democracies. This lack of participation, of interest in politics is quite widespread. If it be more pronounced on the European level, it's also because we've not built a political Europe. With European elections, for example, we see the debates and the discussions are rather focused on national issues. It's always the same national figures, while the debate should really be a European debate. Okay, so everyone knows that the European Parliament is in Strasbourg, but do you personally know of any MEPs from Romania? Can you give any names, recognise any faces?
Yeah, I know one. Elena Basiescu.
Do you follow her actions as a member of the European Parliament? Do you follow her website?
No, I actually don't.
Okay, do you have friends at university who do follow the MEPs on a frequent basis?
No, I don't think so. But it isn't a lack of transparency so much as a lack of interest.
And why the lack of interest?
We wait for the information to be fed to us. I think that here in Strasbourg, we are even more informed because of the presence of the institutions. People, especially in Strasbourg, would benefit from going. There are a lot of open events.
At the moment, I know the EU a lot from the media, but it's not so positive what you hear from or about the EU. It's mostly a criticism, which is kind of sad in my opinion. But yeah, that's what I feel, or how I feel the EU in my daily life right now.
Because of my studies, I think I'm better informed than most people on the European institutions. But I am really interested in European politics, and I believe it should get so much more coverage. We should talk about it more. We should at least broadcast European debates during European elections. The campaigns for those elections should not happen on national level. The European parties should be promoted.
I think that in school programs in France, we somewhat lack lessons about Europe. We don't talk about it much, not to mention the media. Because we don't talk enough about Europe in school, it is difficult for kids to love the European Union. But I think that if we change the school programs, if we put more Europe in there, young people probably would be more in favour of Europe. As young students or young professionals, it is true that we're not informed about all that, and especially not by programs on the television.
The European Union, a plural idea. This is the feeling that comes out of the 60s interview that we have conducted. Contrary to the cliché, young people are not divided in a binary way between a pro-EU side and an anti-Euro side. The youth recognizes achievement, points out flaws, and outlines the possible avenue for the future. Young Europeans have grown in a Europe in crisis this past few years, and this is in this context that some questions are raised. What does feeling a European really mean? What are their fears? What are their hopes?
We invite you to build your own answers by watching the full documentary and watching the interviews conducted.
I've said before that Britain can survive outside the European Union, and indeed that we could find a way. Now the decision has been made to leave, we need to find the best way.